My name is William Irizarry. Thank you for joining me. I would like to start off this show with a quote from Esther Hicks. She says, "A belief is an idea that hasn't changed." And this is how I want to begin my talk in continuation of my last episode on the bubble. The bubble is the space that we occupy and see the world through. We often forget that our view of the world is exactly that, is our perspective. Sometimes we assume the beliefs and the perspectives of others as our own and do not distinguish whether or not those originated in our own mind or were put there by somebody else. It could be an idea that was placed there when we were a child and didn't know any better or just learning, when everything that we saw entered our minds unadulterated, unfiltered, unfettered, and we had no judgment. As we grew older, we developed biases and beliefs, and we stick to them or we try to validate them by our experiences. But it's just like anything else. If I want to buy a certain type of a car and I focus on that vehicle, say it's a Volkswagen Beetle, suddenly everywhere I go, my eyes will be drawn to a Volkswagen Beetle. Our beliefs are much the same. So if we have a certain type of belief or bias that, let's say, Republicans are bad and Democrats are good or vice versa, we are going to attract ourselves to or focus on things that make those beliefs true for us. How does that pertain to the bubble? Well, the bubble is our personal space, and whatever's in our personal space dictates or predicates our experience. So we are drawn to things that put us in a state of needing and having an opinion and a judgment. And I'm not saying that those things are bad in and of themselves. It's how they're used and how they allow us or lead us to an experience that we're having. So what does all of this mean? Where I'm trying to take the listener is to roll it back to the bare essential of how we can quiet our mind and listen to our voice and recognize our relationship with our immediate environment. I'm not talking about our recreative environment, and I'm not talking about our work environment. Those are separate environments that when we enter into with a different role that we play. When we go to work, we put our work hat on. We may be a very different person at work just because that's the person that we have to be. And we will discuss that at a later time, because the work environment for most people is where we spend most of our time, because we have to provide means for ourselves. And so that environment is very important, what happens there. And conversely, our recreation environment, where we go to exercise and let free and be ourselves in a different way, is also a different environment than our work environment. So I just want to distinguish those two things from our personal environment, meaning our closest family, our husbands and wives, our children, our friends that are like family, or they're our chosen family. And within that those people that reflect the best that we are or the worst that we are. Some people have friends in their lives that are agitators to them, that make them uncomfortable. Maybe they've been friends for a very long time and they love that person, and that person is always on their case, being a contrast to them to show them something that is being accentuated on purpose. So, part of this is also taking responsibility for those perspectives that we have and looking closer at those relationships. And so when I talk about the bubble, I'm talking about anything that happens that affects you on a personal and deep level. So obviously, if something was to happen to my son, if he was to fall and hurt himself, of course, I'm sympathetic to that. Unlike if I saw something on TV, I may or may not have the same response because I don't have that close association to those things. So, speaking of things that we see on TV or that we might hear in media, whether it be social or television media, it doesn't matter. Media is media. So when we're listening to what's going on in the world and we assume those beliefs to be ours, I'm very sorry for what's happening in Ukraine and in Russia. I am also with the understanding that somehow this is affecting my life, not the way it's affecting them. It's affecting my life because the prices of things are soaring and everything's going out of control. And deep down inside, I blame that for how things have gone out of control in our lives collectively, even though we have no war taking place in this country. Our war is a war within ourselves and among ourselves. And that's even if we acknowledge it as a war. But going back to our personal bubble, I still have a job. I still have a family. I still celebrate birthdays. I still wake up every day and walk out the door and do the same thing I've been doing for the past 25 years, which is going to work and providing for my family. And that has not changed regardless of what's going on the other side of the world. So this is where I'm taking the bubble, which is how we allow external factors to affect our internal world from which we see the world and the universe. And going back to what Esther Hicks says, a belief is an idea that hasn't changed. A lot of us take a lot of pride that we have strong core beliefs. I would like to say, let those core beliefs be based on laws and things that are always true. So you reap what you sow. You get what you give. The more you give, the more you receive. Only we get in our own way of our receiving for what we have to give. And some people say, same crap, different day. Well, if you say that, then guess what? God, the great architect, the maker of the universe, is saying, okay, so you can keep giving and I'll keep stopping you just short of receiving what you want because you aren't willing to receive it. So are we a good recipient of what we deserve, of what our worthiness dictates that we should have? And we should ask ourselves, how am I getting in my own way? What can I do to be a better giver so that I can have more? And the part of giving is giving from what you have within yourself. But we have to acknowledge we cannot give from an empty cup. We have to fill our cup first. In an emergency situation in an airplane, when those oxygen masks fall from the cabinet and there's an emergency and it says the first procedure is you mask yourself, then you mask your children. You have to take care of yourself first. If you put on your children, you might forsake one of them and yourself because the loss of oxygen can happen so fast. You find yourself unconscious before you are able to save yourself and your children. Now, that is an extreme example of something that could take place, but it's something that we do every single day. We give and we give and we give, and we don't give to ourselves first. There's even a maxim in business is to pay yourself first. Why? Because martyr and sacrifice has a purpose. It should not be a way of life. It should be something that we do intentionally. So taking care of our needs so that we can allow the abundance that is available to everyone to flow into our lives uninhibited. So when I speak of the bubble, I speak of us looking at ourselves very closely and acknowledging our own role in what happens to us and removing ourselves from a position of blame. We would love to blame, and all blame does is create conflict and drama. If anything, blaming is an external expression of what's happening to ourselves internally. And if you feel yourself wanting to blame something or somebody, whether it's somebody close to you, whether it's somebody on the other side of the country that did something that you saw in a news story, or something on the other side of the world that we have no direct impact on per se, then we should be taking notes of ourselves and inventory of, oh, this is where my emotions take over, and this is where I have unfinished business. And so when we take a look at our bubbles, how are our bubbles operating? Is our bubble clean? Do we have open communication and honest relationships with people that are willing to be honest with us? And honesty can hurt, but it doesn't have to. Honesty can be brutal, and it can also be sweet. When people say, oh, I want to tell you the honest truth. How about the honest truth that you are a beautiful person, that when you look in the mirror, you should see this amazing form of life that has so much to give? That is the honest truth, okay? The honest truth can also be that we are not treating ourselves with the proper level of respect and dignity that we deserve unto ourselves. So how can we expect the same from other people, especially within our close circles? Nobody is exempt from being abused by people that they're close to. And this leads to boundaries, okay? And so part of the bubble is boundaries, is that we set boundaries so that people can't come and go freely in our lives and cause us destruction and mayhem if it's not what we intend. And it happens because we're human, and our desire is to be connected and to be intimately connected with people and to be uninhibited in how we converse. So I ask everyone to ask themselves these questions. How are your boundaries? The ones that you make, are they holding up? And oh, by the way, a boundary is not some wall that we hide behind. It's actually something that's very fluid, something that we should be observing. And if a boundary needs to be taken down and reestablished to meet our current needs, then then so be it. It is not a barrier or a wall to hide behind. We're meant to be exposed. It does not mean that we should also. So let's do a quick summary of what has taken place. Our bubble requires boundaries. We need to self-assess how we interact with our immediate environment environment. We need to understand the state of our own mentality and how reactive we are to things that happen to us, how we express ourselves externally for what is taking place internally, and only asking ourselves the questions and embracing the fact that we have strengths and weaknesses. We have beautiful things about ourselves and we have unsavory things about ourselves, and they exist simultaneously, and it's okay. And at the same time, what are we doing with extreme intentionality? Or what are we doing that is automatically happening in subconscious and we have no control over it? And these are the things that you can seek help for. We always need an outside perspective of somebody who's going to help us level up. I record this and I hope that the listenership is understanding that everything I'm saying is about leveling up. And so I renamed my podcast OTR. OTR stands for On the Rise, because we are all on the rise in one way or another. If we are not doing that with intentionality and evaluating ourselves and going in the direction that we want to go, we are the only ones that are responsible and no one else. And so I challenge everyone, just as I've challenged myself, even to make this recording, to give you the opportunity to self-assess and to evaluate what is going on in your personal bubble, in your personal world. How is your personal world being influenced by the outside world? And are you giving yourself the opportunity to make the most of the gifts that you have? Be beautiful, be brave, my friends. I will see you in the next podcast.